students, this is Veena, Assistant Professor in the Department of English, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. Today, we are going to discuss the topic different types of listeners, which is under your module 1. Here, we are going to try to understand what kind of listeners we come across in our day-to-day communication and what are the aspects which are very essential to understand the listeners of different types. Now, let us get started. Yes. Before we talk about the types of listeners, try to first understand a brief note about what is communication. Communication means understanding. The rapport between the two people, the interaction between the people, the expression of thoughts, the expression of ideas, the expression of the views between the two people or between a group or between in front of some audience. So, when we are communicating, when we are sharing our ideas, that is called the communication process. For the better communication process, it is very important to us to develop the 4 important pillars which are called as the major aspects of the communication entities are the 4 skills. Those are listening, speaking, reading and writing. Where listening will come under the input process while speaking is its output process, and reading comes in the process of input and writing comes under the output. Now, how is that these skills are achieved? What are the basics? What are the characteristics which we have to understand and remember while communication is the major entity which is covered under your syllabus of BTech first year engineering. Now, every module is covered with one set of skills and we are going to cover some grammatical structures in your syllabus. Now, listening skills come under your module 1 where we will learn about the process, elements, characteristics, barriers and the types of listeners whom you have to understand and try to make yourself acknowledged and try to make yourself acquainted with such listeners and develop your skills in the way of the communication. Now, who are the active listeners? The first type of listeners are active listeners. Who are they? What are the elements of these active listening skills? Who are called as active listeners? Let us see it. The listener who listens with intent and tries to make an earnest effort to understand. That means a person who is intuitively interested in listening to you and tries to understand you. For example, when we are having problem with a concern or with an issue, our family members pay attention towards our speech. Why? Because they want to listen keenly, being attentive towards our speech. So, the quality of active listeners is to try to make an intent listening effort and make an effort to understand what the sender has transmitted. They are very active. They will pay all the attention towards you. They will listen to all the information what you are talking about and try to understand it and respond to you very rightly. He makes head nods and gestures to the sender in approval of his understanding. How is that you are going to know that he is listening to you? What way that person is listening to you? What are the things he reciprocate which will make you understand that he is listening to you? That is, he will do his head nod. That is, he will nod his head or portray any kind of gestures. That means the body language, what he present while he is listening to you will show that he is paying active listening towards you. He may also give verbal approvals. That means they can also say yes. When you're talking something, yes, no. it could be like that. So they could add some annotations, verbal signals, such that you will understand that yes, truly they are paying attention to your listening thing. Then comes the passive listener. Till now we spoke about the active listeners. Now passive listeners. Who are the passive listeners? They do not portray or they do not show any kind of gestures through their body language. They will just listen to you. That is, the listener who without any gestures or head nods or verbal approvals listen to the sender is called a passive listener. That means they will just sit erect. They are listening, but they are not reciprocating to your conversation with any kind of gesture or any kind of signal or any kind of symbol through their body posture. So they are passive listeners. Just they sit erect and they just listen to you. They will not make either verbal signs or the non-verbal signs. Next. Cosmetic listener. Now, cosmetic listener gives indication or acts as he is interested in the information that the sender is passing over. That means he will wantedly show some gesture. Cosmetic, that means what is the word cosmetic deliver? It shows that makeup. He will make up his body postures or the way he'll give some indication that yes, I'm listening. Some people overact and tend to nod their head more than what it is needed. Yes. All these kind of thing. That means cosmetic listener, a listener who gives an indication or just acts as if he is paying more attention to you. Then he utilizes his gestures and head nods to create an impression before the sender that he is listening. That is, before we talk something, before we give some information, he starts nodding his head. That is he is just giving a makeup to us. He is acting as if he is listening. Now, we have to be careful with such kind of listeners. Are they really listening to us? Are they really trying to understand what we are delivering it to them? That is the point which we have to remember. Then comes thinking listener. Here, this thinking listener is a thoughtful listener. Here, the listener who listens initially and later slips from listening to thinking mode. Initially, he will be listening to you. He understands. He tries to understand and tries to analyze and interpret. Slowly, he sinks down into the thinking mode of what you were saying. So, what he does is, he pays attention to you. He starts his notion of listening very, very slowly. He drops down, sinking down to thinking mode. He changes from listening mode to thinking mode. That is called a thinking listener. Preparing how to counter or oppose or disagree or what to talk. What is he thinking? Now this person is giving this information to me. Do I like it or not? Do I need to oppose it? Do I need to ask a question or do I need to agree with that person? How is that I am going to answer to that person? So, by listening, all these thoughts will be moving around in that particular type of listener. So, initially he will listen, but gradually he sinks down to think the process about how to respond to you after you finish speaking to him. Then, forecasting listeners. The listener who hears something initially and makes an attempt to forecast the conclusion of the message. He listens to you and he just gives the conclusion. He don't think. He just listen and he just forecasts and gives his conclusion over the speech. Here he is not thinking or analyzing or understanding the relevance, trying to connect. No, nothing at all. He just forecasts his conclusion about your speech, whatever you are talking about whatever you are specifically informing to that particular moment. Then, before it is fully delivered, when will he conclude a statement? Before you complete, he barges in and he gives a conclusion. That kind of person is called a forecast listener. A listener who draws conclusion of the content of the information rendered from a person in between. And he will just conclude saying that so and so impression I have got from your speech. But he have not completely listened or heard to your conversation. Before it is fully delivered is called forecasting listener. The forecasting listener obscures the communication of the sender. That is, he interrupts the communication of the person who is talking or delivering a speech. Then comes filtering listener. Now, the listener who actively involves and gets enthusiastic while listening to the matters that he likes, and who offers a deaf ear when matters that are not interested to him. Here, the filtering listener is one who will listen to you with all the active ears only when you're delivering the topic which is interested to him. If you're talking something which is not at all interested to him, he will make a deaf ear towards you. That is, he will filter the requirement. If he is liking your speech, he will listen. If he is not liking your speech, he will just make a deaf ear towards your speech. So, such kind of listener is called a filtering listener. Next, sinking listener. The listener who listens with a lot of energy in the beginning and who gets lost on account of his unfocused, wandering mind is called a sinking listener. That means a listener who starts initially with all the enthusiasm, with all the interest in him. But gradually, due to some disturbance or due to unfocused attitude or due to the wandering mentality of his brain of thoughts, he gradually sinks down his interest towards you and he stops listening to you. That kind of listener is called the sinking listener. Then, empathetic listener. This we usually see among our family members. Special. Actually, everyone have to be an empathetic listener. It is very, very good. And I recommend you all to be empathetic listener, especially when you are working. You must be able to wear the shoes of the person who is having the concern to resolve it on time. So, if you want to be a good leader, if you want to be a good authoritative person, if you are going to be the chairman of a business firm, you must be a good listener and you must be an empathetic listener. Because you must be able to understand their feeling, their notion behind their concern. That is what is very important when it comes to this kind of listening. So, empathetic listeners who not only understands what has been said, but the unsaid also. They not only understand your verbal speech, but they also understand their intuition behind the speech. That is, that which is not said also understood by this kind of listeners. They completely listen to you, understand your feelings, which are said and which are not said. Those kind of listeners are called empathetic listeners. And empathetic listener takes a deeper plunge into understanding the other person's feelings and emotions. Here, the feelings and emotions are given the priority. An empathetic listener not only listens to your concern, but also he will understand the emotion and the feeling, that which is not said in the form of words, that which is hidden behind that particular information. So those kind of listeners are called emphatic listeners. The corporate world requires leaders as better listeners to understand and care for their teammates. Hence, leaders need to be active, empathetic listeners. As everywhere, as the youngsters, you must learn the ability to listen before you speak. Listen before you conclude something. Listen before you order someone. That will really fetch your growth to the heights of success. And be an empathetic listener. Try to understand what other person is trying to convey to you. If you are in the higher position, if you are leading a team, try to understand the concerns of your team members and try to resolve them. So, in such a way, your growth is already done, as well as your organization growth will also be reached to the heights of peaks. Now, the types of listeners: active listeners, passive listeners, non-listeners, those who are always stable, evaluative listeners. That means the one who evaluate. Whatever you talk, they come to a conclusion. Whatever you talk, they give you a suggestion. Whatever you talk, they recommend some feedback. Those are called evaluative listeners. Now, types of listening. How do you listen? What are the elements which you concern in deep within yourself while listening? What are the types of listening which we generally tend to use in the day-to-day life? One is appreciative listening. That is the enjoyment. When our friends come to us, when they are sharing something which is very happy, when they are sharing something which is joyful, you tend to listen to them. That is called appreciative listening. Then empathetic, emotional support. When you are low down, your feelings, when you are bored, when somebody you have some problem, some concern. So that is called empathetic listening. Comprehensive, that is to understand particular information, to understand particular problem, to understand particular feature, element, or any kind of idea, thoughts, expression. We tend to be a comprehensive listener. Next, critical. Critical is the one who evaluate, the one who accept or reject. That means those who tend to evaluate your talk process. The one who can judge whether what you are saying is applicable or not applicable. The one who appreciates or the one who rejects is the comprehensive listener. Now, active listener. What are the things which are very, very important to remember to be an active listener? Here, types of listeners. See, detached. What kind of detached listeners? How? What are the elements we find in this detached listeners are? Avoid making eye contact. That is, when you are not listening, you avoid making eye contact. So, first and foremost symbol which will make others know whether you are listening to them or not is the eye contact. If you are maintaining perfect eye contact with the speaker, so you are an attentive listener. When you avoid the eye contact, that means you are a detached listener. Then, contact appears withdrawn, lacks enthusiasm, seems inactive, disinterested, and bored. So, these are all the qualities of a detached listener. Completely not interested, don't make any eye-to-eye contact. He is not at all enthusiastic. He is just sitting there and just being deaf towards your speech. Then, passive, may or may not have eye contact, but he is listening. A passive listener. Then, fakes attention. He fakes here the attention. He don't like to give an attention. Then, use little energy or effort. Appears calm and laid back. He just sit quietly in a corner of the room among the audience and listens to you. He does not portray any kind of gesture, does not portray any kind of signal such that you understand that that person is listening to you. But actually he is listening. He is a passive listener. Then, Involved. The one who involves and listen have some direct eye contact, has an alert, postures, gives the speaker some attention, reflects on the message to the degree. That means he completely involves in himself into the content. He gives eye contact. He pays signals or symbols or gestures such that the speaker is attracted towards him and develop that eye to eye contact and pays the attention towards the listener. Then active. What kind of active listener we found are have an alert posture, use direct eye contact, gives full attention, focus on what is said, participates fully. A person completely participates, maintain eye to eye contact, listen to you, talk to you, reflect back, and then give the feedback. So these are all kinds of listeners we come across in our day-to-day life. To maintain effective communication, to maintain and develop that rapport between all the relationships among our friends, we must know, we must be able to identify which kind of listener we are addressing. How are the audience? How many are the active listeners? How many are the passive listeners? If you can sort it out, then you are the person who can understand and analyze the speakers or the people whom you are listening, and such that in that case you can develop your effective communication skills. Then here, what are the characteristics which are involved in active listening and which are very, very important for you all to develop are sensing. That is, you must be able to sense the purpose, the relevance of the content which is addressed. Postpone evaluation. Don't directly evaluate someone's conversation. Postpone the evaluation. Just sense the message which is rendered to you. Avoid interruption. Don't just launder here and there through your brain or through your thoughts. Just avoid interruptions. Maybe they are physical or they are mental or any kind of interruptions. Just avoid them. Then maintain interest. See that you maintain that interest in that topic such that you get involved into it and understand what others are talking to you. Then responding. How do you respond? Show interest, clarify the message. If there is no clarification, try to ask questions. Try to ask for the clarification. In that way, you can respond. Then comes evaluating. How do you evaluate? After the process of the speaking thing is over, you can empathize. That means you can put forth yourself in that same position and evaluate the information, whether it is rendered properly or not, whether it is achieved its needs or not. All that evaluation can be done. Organize information. Whatever you have heard, try to organize them in the order. Try to put forth proper points in the specific way in a brief note such that others understand it and reflect back to you in a very effective way. Now, 7 types of listening skills. We have 7 types of listening skills. We have many more, but some of them are discussed here in detail. One is informational listening. That is, you will use informational listening to understand and retain information. Specifically, when you listen to workshops, seminars, presentation in your workspaces, all there you will tend to listen. It is important that because you need to highly engage. You have to engage yourself. You have to apply critical thinking to what you are learning because it is highly essential to gain the information from that speech. So, it must be informative listening. It must have all that critical abilities. You must be highly attentive. You must be highly engaged towards that kind of meetings. Some examples of information listening are work training, as I already told you, self-paced learning at home or work. When you are doing some work on your own, you must be using this information listening. Listening to an educational e-books. When you are doing self-learning, educational ebooks will help you a lot. Reading and listening will help you surely for the development and enhancement of your communication skills. So listen more to the books, ebooks. We have got lot of material over net. So try to listen to them and develop your structure of the language and also make your language effective. Then discriminative listening. What is this discriminative listening? It is first listening type that you are born with. Everyone innately has indiscriminative listening. That is, it is how babies understand the intention of a phrase before they can understand words. That is, it is differently abled. You will be able to understand, though you are not talking in the right language, like the baby's language. When they are born, they are trying to understand you, the words you speak. You don't generally speak the language to the little babies. You make some sounds, you make some noise, you make some gestures, actions to make them understand. That is called the discriminative learning. The way listening in a different form. Then biased listening. That is, biased listening is also known as selective listening. You will be doing the biased listening when information that they specifically want to hear. If you want that information, if you are interested in the information, if that information is related to you, then only you will be listening. If not, you will stop listening to it and you will just pay a deaf ear. That is called biased listening. Then, sympathetic listening is driven by emotion. It completely depends on the emotion of the other person in the way of rendering the expressions of the other person. Instead of focusing on the message spoken through words, the listener focuses on the feelings and emotions of the speaker. Here the information what is said is not important. Here the expression and the emotion which is portrayed is important. So, in sympathetic listener, we tend to understand the feelings more. We give importance to the feeling and the emotions rather than the listening part of the information. That is called sympathetic listening. Then comprehensive listening. Unlike discriminative listening, comprehensive listening requires language skills. That is, the way you are going to understand, comprehend the words, the language structure, the gestures in a comprehensive way. Several other types listening build on a comprehensive listening. That is, you tend to listen to the right language with the right sentence structures, with the right grammatical essence. That is what is your comprehensive listening. Now, critical listening. If you need to analyze complex information, you will need to use critical listening. When a complex information is provided, you must be able to make yourself wear the shoes of critical listener. You must critically analyze, understand the complex message which is delivering there on the podium. Here, using critical thinking while listening goes deeper than comprehensive listening. Instead of taking of the information to face value, you can use critical listening to evaluating what being said, what is told. It is crucial way of problem solving at work. When there is a concern, when there is a problem arose, you have to be a critical listener from the team members, whatever they are talking to you. There is a problem arose in the team from maybe regarding a project or any kind of negotiation, any kind of requirement. Now, you cannot just make a judgment and pass a judgment blaming any of your team members. Be a critical listener. listen to what all the team members are having the notion towards that particular concept. They have their own perspectives, they have their own explanations. While listening to that explanation, you play the role of a critical listener. So you must be able to analyze, interpret and evaluate the speaker whom you are talking to at that point of time to lay the judgment about the process, what happened there, to come to a conclusion. So this is very, very important part. This many of the employers, many of the employees need this kind of technique to address to their employees. Then learning all types of listening to improve your life and your work. Here we have many kinds of listening. When we are interested, we will be an active listener. When we are not interested, we are a biased listener. When we are emotionally connected to the person, we are sympathetic listener. And when we are concerned more about others' feeling along with the information, we are empathetic listeners. When we are a boss, when we are a superior who have to evaluate the work of a team, then we will be a critical listener. You must acquire the skill of all types of listening. As an adherent professional, as a professional of scientific advancements and the technological innovations, you must inculcate yourself to make use of the listening type at particular situation, time, space and wherever it is needed. In the family group, understand in what way you will be authentic, in what way you will be pleasable to your people. So try to play the role of a sympathetic or empathetic listener there. If you are on the professional platform, be a critical listener. Okay, and also an empathetic listener. It depends on the time, it depends on the situation. So try to analyze the situations, try to understand the people, try to cater the needs of the environment where you are equipped with. Understand the situation, understand the people around you, be a good listener and try to understand others and try to develop your communication skills to pave path for the success of your professional growth. So this way listening skills will be very helpful and they are very important to you. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.